There we go. Good to see you all. Uh, yeah. So let's say some prayers to try to motivate, try to set a motivation, sort of like the inertia that will carry through, even if we forget it during the class, if our mind gets distracted, the whole event, we're thinking, I'm going to take I'm going to go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha Dharma and the Supreme Assembly through the collections I create during this class, through listening to the Dharma. May I become a Buddha in order to benefit all migrating beings, or to benefit migrating beings. Sangye churang soke chognam la changchu badu dagni kapsu chi dagi chunyen gi pe sognam ki drola penche sangye drupasho. Sangye chodang soki chognam la changchu badu dagni kyapsu chi dagi chunyen gipe sognam ki drola penche sangye drupasho. And then offering a mandala. By offering this ground, anointed with perfume and strewn with flowers. So this is something you visualize, or you actually are preparing a mandala plate, by cleaning it with your forearm and so forth, putting rice on it and perfuming it, or just imagining your hand mudra as starting with the ground. By offering this ground anointed with perfume and strewn with flowers, adorned above with Mount Meru, the four continents surrounding it, the four directions, the sun and the moon, visualized as a Buddha realm. So we start from the basis is just our solar system that we recognize now, but then we imagine visualizing that, transforming that into a Buddha realm. Due to that, may all migrators enjoy a pure realm. And request to our primordial gurus, O holy and perfect pure lamas, from the clouds of compassion that form in the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom, please release a rain of vast and profound Dharma, precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be trained. Idam Guru Radna Mandalakam Niryatayami. Okay. So having done that, let's try to go a little deeper with our meditation to set the motivation. So sit comfortably, relax your body and mind. Place your attention on the breathing. And once you've recognized it, keep it in mind with the mental factor mindfulness. And be alert, have another part of your mind as a spy to watch if you're multitasking, if you're thinking of other things. You should be aware of the directionality, whether you're breathing in or breathing out. when you do this kind of meditation by yourself in preparation for your own practices, you can continue watching the breathing until the mind is calmed. Here we're going to assume that we've had some success and now go to the more subtle object of mindfulness, the mental consciousness itself and its nature, its conventional nature of clear light. Which we infer at the beginning through watching its contents, the contents of the mind, the mental consciousness, not the contents of the visual or ear consciousness, nose, tongue, body consciousness. The mental consciousness can know those things, but if you are successful in withdrawing the winds away from your eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and body sense bases, sort of like hunkering down into the heart, as the winds naturally do when you fall asleep or when you're dying. You notice the contents of the consciousness like clouds in an otherwise clear sky. If you pay attention to those cloud-like thoughts, they perpetuate, they continue. If you deprive them of your attention, they start to evaporate away, so to speak. They absorb back into the consciousness. And those kinds of experiences lead you to infer this nature of the mind as being unobstructing to the arisal or reabsorption of mental events into it. Our conventional Buddha nature, the conventional clear light nature of the mind. Here, when we're talking about this lack of obstruction, we're talking about a negative phenomena, not imagining sort of a luminosity or clear light that might appear at the time of death. That's a positive phenomena. This means I can overcome my faults because they only occur due to my familiarity with them. I can overcome my faults, faulty minds, anger, attachment, jealousy, laziness, big ego, attachment, craving. We've become habituated with them since beginningless time, and our mind easily falls under their sway again, like a roll of construction paper or a poster that you bought at the bookstore that was rolled up and you forgot about it in your closet for months, and when you open it up again, it doesn't want to lie flat immediately. You have to sort of hold it down. So we can overcome these faults with temporal antidotes and eventually with the ultimate antidote of emptiness. The fact that we can recognize this and feel some joy that we have this resource is due to having this auspicious moment of leisure and endowment that the Buddha praised as very rare, very meaningful, difficult to find again. And he advised to make use of it, to make use of its higher meaning of achieving at least liberation from cyclic existence, but preferably for those who are so inclined, who are more intelligent, to use this life of leisure and endowment to achieve enlightenment for the sake of sentient beings, to generate, cultivate this mind of bodhicitta, which has been trained through recognized sentient beings in a kind light, kind-hearted, good-hearted. As Lama Yeshe used to say so many times when we would criticize someone, he said, "They means well, dear." You know, all sentient beings, even they act in ways that appear and are self-interested and egoistic and so forth. They want things to be good somehow. They're deceived, they're misaligned. And cultivating that further, that warm-heartedness towards sentient beings by developing empathy for them, actually recognizing the equality between ourselves and others, and the fact that we don't want to have those sufferings, we don't want to create that negative karma that they're creating. In the same way, to feel compassion for them, to wish that they would be free from that. But left to their own devices since beginningless time, they have only floundered, as we have in cyclic existence, the ocean of cyclic existence. We need a guide. They need a guide. And we have some particular karma with many, many sentient beings that we can lead them more quickly out of suffering into enlightenment than other emanations of Buddhas if we were to achieve Buddhahood. But to think, I must achieve enlightenment for their sake. To do that, I have to practice the bodhisattva deeds, to accumulate the two collections of merit and wisdom, that were explained by the Buddha in the Mahayana Sutras, expounded on by Nagarjuna, commented on by Chandrakirti, and explained again by Lama Tsong Khapa in the text we're studying. Especially the collection of wisdom, but supplementing that explanation of how to accumulate the collection of wisdom with the explanation of how to accumulate the collection of merit, mainly through skillful means, bodhicitta, bodhisattva deeds, and so forth. So for that purpose, looking for this next 2 hours, whatever it is, or these subjects are going to be explained. I'm going to listen with a new mind, a baby-like mind. Listening, contemplating, meditating on the material with the purpose, with the aim that in so doing, we're going to accumulate these two collections that will lead us to the two bodies of a Buddha, the Dharmakaya and Rupakaya. Which fulfill both my own aim in achieving the Dharmakaya and the aim of sentient beings in achieving the Rupakaya, the two form bodies, Nirmanakaya and Sambhogakaya. That's my aim, my long-term aim. I'm going to participate in order to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. Yeah. Okay. What did John Campbell say here? Okay. Good to see you. Hi, Karen. Mintu's in the background. How is everyone? So, any questions? How are you doing? This is our last class before a month break. Nadine, I think this is usually when you want to say something.
Oh, thank you so much. Another question. I hope it's not too silly. I was thinking, from the scientific point of view, and also I think from Prasangika point of view, one can say there is definitely going to be a time 395 million years from now. Definitely, it's going to happen. But when I think about Chittamatra, then I think maybe
Wait. So some enormous amount of time from
yes,
now,
yes.
what will happen?
It's going to happen. There is going to be a time, millions and millions of years from now. Nobody can stop that. It will happen. The future,
Well,
far time future.
hey, for instance, a very, very far future, this particular universe will no longer exist, right? There will be, so right now we're in we've passed the eon of creation. We're in the eon of what is it called? Abidance. And then there will be an eon of destruction and then an eon of emptiness. So it's not going to be, it's hard to say that time. We're talking about time relative to what we're experiencing right now. But anyway, let's say you want to say that the many, many kalpas from now, okay.
Let's say 5 million years from now. It's going to happen. Such a time is coming. But then I think about Chittamatra, and if they say there is no external reality separate from the mind, then I'm a little bit doubt. I get a little doubt if it's really going to happen 5 million years from now. For example, if a sentient being attains liberation, or then it's beyond time. So if the mind is if there is no external reality separate from the mind, then I'm not so sure. Can we really say there is definitely going to be a time 5 million years from now?
I'm not sure what you're worried about there, but anyway, yeah, there are many. I'm glad that you're immersing yourself into the Chittamatra as though you're trying to see whether it's self-consistent or whether it's contradictory within and so forth. Those are good things. I can't answer that question because it's a little bit, to me, a little bit vague, but we can address it again later when I think about what you're talking about. a little bit more, and maybe if you think about it, we can explain it a little bit more. Let's see if anyone else has a question about our previous class. We okay? So, Doris, if you could put up in the chat the two PDFs that we were talking about this morning. So in the last class, Doris posted a PDF that I prepared from the Lalita Vistara. I can't remember, what was it, the 26th chapter that told about the episode of the Buddha turning the first wheel of Dharma. Do you remember that? Stephen, you're with us? Yeah. And one of the things that came up in that was the statement about the 12 aspects of the Four Noble Truths. Four Noble Truths. Enunciate better here. And I was a little bit unclear, so I did some research, and it, of course, is something that maybe some of you already knew, these 12 aspects of the Four Noble Truths. But yeah, so if you open the first of those PDFs, no, that's not the one. Oh, Doris, that's not the one. The five near. That's what I wanted to ask people about later. Anyway, that's okay. The second of the two. So this is a translation of that.
Wheel of the Dharma, of the Dhamma, that the text.
Say again?
Do you mean setting in motion the wheel of the Dhamma or the Dharma wheel of the Four Truths?
Yes. So
Yes.
both of them.
Okay.
Both of them. Leave the first one for the time being. That was sort of I was going to ask you later a question and then give you the answer.
Sorry about that.
Okay, so the second one is an excerpt edited from the Princeton Dictionary of Buddhism, this big, massive book that I recommend very highly. If you can get the electronic version, it's much easier. You could have it on your iPad or whatever, by Don Lopez and another scholar who I don't know that much about. Here is their entry about the what is called the Katu, means four. Satya means truths, right? Dharma chakra, the turning of the wheel of the four truths. And so he mentions in there when the Buddha first turned it at Rishipatana, and you remember what Rishipatana is. That's another name for the deer park, right? Where the rishis cause themselves to become inflamed, and their ashes fell on the ground. So Rishipatana, where the rishis fell. In the first turning of the wheel, the Buddha set in motion a wheel with 12 aspects. So this is what was being talked about in the Lalita Vistara and also in the Pali Sutra, or Sutta as is said in Pali, that is a companion to this. So let's just read there. It says, number one, he set forth the four truths the first time by saying the five aggregates qualified by birth, aging, sickness, and death are the noble truth of suffering. So he first of all set forth that, and stated that craving or tanha, thirst, is the noble truth of their origination. That's how the Buddha explained it at the time. That what we usually say is, we would say is the view of the transitory collection is even more subtle cause of suffering. The elimination of that craving is the noble truth of their cessation, and that the Eightfold Noble Path is the noble truth of the path leading to their cessation. So the first of these 12 aspects was to set forth each of those 4 truths, stating this is suffering and so forth. Then he set forth the 4 truths the second time in the same extended discourse. He said, I knew well the truth of suffering was what I need to comprehend. I have to comprehend that. One has to, let's say, know well the truth of cessation is what has to be realized or actualized, and the truth of the path what has to be cultivated. I think he's left off one thing there. What did he leave off? The truth of origination is left off in that. So that's the second set of 4. So there's 4 things that you state, then 4 things that you that he explained, that he realized the importance of them, that he had to do something, and then then he set forth the 4 truths a third and final time when he said, I comprehended the truth of suffering. I eliminated the true origin of suffering. I realized the true cessation of suffering, and I cultivated the true path. Hi, John. Good to see you. So in that second one, he's left off, I knew well that the truth of the origin of suffering has to be eliminated. Okay. So anyway, that refers to these 12 aspects that I probably have heard before, but at the time last class, I was scratching my head. I wasn't quite sure. I was thinking there was some confusion with the 16 aspects. So these are the 12 aspects, and you're welcome to continue reading that. But in the other one, which is from the Pali, still preserved in the Pali. Where did it go here? There we go. This is translated by the well-known Bhikkhu Bodhi, so certainly as good as other translations, if not better. So you can see in there, I've highlighted a little ways through there where it says, on the first page, this is the noble truth of suffering. And the noble truth of suffering is to be fully understood. The noble truth of suffering has been fully understood. So so the same 3 statements can be made, similar statements can be made about each of the 4 noble truths. This is the truth of origination. This has not suffering has to be understood, but the origin of suffering has to be abandoned, and the origin of suffering has been abandoned would be the third of those. So each of those is explained in the actual sutra of turning the first Dharma wheel. So that's worth reading. It's not as long as the exposition in the Lalita Vistara that some of you recited, as I did, on the celebration just a couple of days ago of the first turning of the wheel of Dharma when karma was multiplied and everything. So you have that as a resource you can go check. You've got a month. Okay. Are we okay? Everyone understand? Any questions about that? Maybe you'd have to read it before you have any questions. Okay. So again, okay, now because that is already up there, if you take a look at the, well, let me ask you again. I asked several classes ago, what were the 5 actions of immediate retribution? I think some of you knew. And then I asked, what were the 5 secondary acts of immediate retribution, or that which is near to that? And I don't think anyone knew at the time. Has anyone researched that? Richard, did you research that? What are the 5 near? No? Mikhail? Okay. Stephen, did I see you putting your hand up, or is that the mountain in the background? There's some road in the background over your shoulder that looks like your hand might be up. Okay. Okay. Naughty. No one, no one researched that. Nadine, did you research that? Okay. So take a look at the first of those PDFs that Doris put up. The 5 actions of immediate retribution, or the 5 near heinous acts, or 5 secondary acts of immediate retribution. This is from the Abhidharma text translated by my dear friend Ian, by Chim Jampayang. So this is a Tibetan text that was a commentary to the Abhidharma Kosha in Tibetan. So it says, question, is one definitely only born in hell through committing a heinous act, so one of the acts of immediate retribution, or is one also born there through other karmas? And the answer is, one is without doubt, born in hell also through karma similar to the heinous acts, or to the acts of immediate retribution. So what are they? They are defiling one's mother or a female arhat. That's the first one. So that is similar to what? That's similar to killing one's mother. So of the 5 acts of immediate retribution, right? What are they? They're matricide, killing one's mother, killing one's father, patricide, killing an arhat, causing schism in the Sangha, and drawing blood from the Tathagata, right? So the ones that are similar to that is first defiling one's mother or a female arhat through sexual misconduct. So that happens sometimes. You even read about it in the news, right? Someone has had sexual intercourse with one's mother. You don't read so much about arhats being defiled because people don't know about that. Killing one definitely abiding as a bodhisattva is similar to killing one's father, is similar to patricide. So that means someone who's reached the stage of being a bodhisattva where one is irreversible. Third is killing any of the 7 learner Arya beings. So when we talk about the different kinds of Aryas, usually we talk about the 7, stream enterer, once returner, and so forth, entering into this and that. So killing any of those is similar to killing an arhat, even though they're not arhats yet, because they're still on the learner stage, right? Taking away the Sangha's means of assembling, so that can mean various things. It can mean taking away the resources of the Sangha, disrobing the Sangha, destroying the meeting house of the Sangha, and so forth. And then and so that is similar to causing a schism of the Sangha, when you've caused some disruption from the Sangha assembling. And then the 5th, destroying a stupa, which the communist Chinese did as they invaded Tibet in many, many places. That is similar to drawing blood from the Tathagata, or causing blood to be, spilling blood of the Tathagata, motivated by evil mind. So I thought that was worth you having also. So you have that as a resource. Okay. So if I ask you in the future, John, what the 5 actions of immediate retribution and what the 5 similars are, you will be able to answer, right?
Without hesitation.
Okay, so, joking. Okay, so let's get back to our text itself. So we're at the point of refuting the standpoint of the Chittamatra, which has already been presented in the previous section. Their presentation of the their presentation of the
Venerable.
Alaya Vijnana. Yes, Diana.
How does this relate, the immediate retribution for killing one's mother or father, how does that relate to the truth that all beings have been our mothers?
Right. So
Like, does it matter that this person was
mother
my
now.
mother when I can't remember, nearly infinite lifetimes ago?
Right. So right now, in this lifetime, the objects that are most heavy in terms of karma are one's mother and father because they gave us this life. And our teachers, in this case, we take the analogy that the Tathagata. So so although other sentient beings have been kind to us in the past, their bases right now are not the same as the bases when they were kind to us. But our present mother and father, the bases, their bodies and minds now are the same as when they were, when they were kind to us this lifetime. So they become heavier than, just actions done with other sentient beings who have been our mother in other lifetimes, but that their kindness it was there, and we have to recognize that a depthless kindness of all sentient beings, but our present mother and father are especially heavy objects of karma as are our gurus. Okay, Mintu, what do you think?
Oh, hi, Venerable. I actually have a question about this sort of logic from time to time. So basically, they say that every being has been our mother in the past, right?
They say, yeah.
And we have to be kind to them because we sort of owe them something. But then, does it mean that we have also been everybody else's mother in the past too, by symmetry arguments, and therefore to infinity kind of balance out, so we do not owe anybody anything.
We don't. So, yeah. So that's the wrong way of thinking. Sentient beings have been depthlessly kind, even it's not as though you're doing some kind of economic kind of tally, how kind they are, how much we owe them. When we recognize the kindness of sentient beings, and we have a warm feeling for them, then that can engender the mind of compassion and the wish to alleviate their suffering through recognizing that they have been kind to us and recognizing that those who have been kind to us, it's unseemly, even in the worldly sense, to ignore their kindness, even if someone who in the in everyday life treats us sort of dismissively and so forth. If on some occasion they help us in some way, we should appreciate that kindness and we should try to repay that kindness. That's the implication there. But let's leave that discussion for the time being get back to our text again. So we've gone through the section where the Chittamatra position about alaya vijnana and external objects has been stated. And now we're at the point called refuting that standpoint. Is that right? Yeah. And we're at particular subsection, how the dream analogy does not establish intrinsic existence of consciousness. So this is where we're starting today. So this is on the written text, Jimpa, page 307, and the FPMT translation that you have, the PDF, page 171. Okay, are we all together? So where we are. So first of all, Jimpa begins by quoting this next stanza, this next shloka. Where is your analogy for this mind with no external reality? Who's talking there? Mikhail, who do you think is talking?
A Chittamatra opponent asking.
Yeah,
Oh.
that should be Chandrakirti, right?
Mm-hmm.
Probably. I mean, it could include other people, but so this is talking to the Chittamatra. So what's your example, Chittamatra? What's your analogy for this mind with no external reality? So the actual word in Tibetan is pe, which we usually translate as example. Second line says, if you say like a dream, for example, or by analogy, let's examine this. Again, Chandrakirti saying, such a mind does not exist for me even in a dream. What mind is he talking about there?
An inherently existing mind.
So that's one of the hallmarks of the Chittamatra, right? That the mind is truly existing. So such a mind does not exist for me even in a dream. So what you're proposing, this truly existent mind, doesn't exist for me even in a dream. Therefore, this analogy of yours has no validity. That's how Jimpa's translated it. Actually, the Tibetan just says, pei yo min. So that example does not exist. Your example does not exist. Jimpa's translated it as this analogy has no validity. This example has no validity. Okay, you understand the words, right? So the commentary by Lama Tsong Khapa begins, if you, Chittamatra, assert that there is no external reality, so this is one of their basic precepts, right? The followers of a Sangha, no external reality, it's all the same entity as the mind, but there is a mind that exists through its intrinsic characteristic. Where is your analogy for this? Something that you could cite and say, for example. So this is what the question is being asked for the Chittamatra. To this, the Chittamatra responds, Chittamatrans would say, for instance, one is sleeping inside a tiny room, and due to the illusion caused by sleep, one dreams of an entire herd of mad elephants. Right? Whatever your dreams are, you might, there's something that can't fit in your small room. Jimpa translates this as due to the illusion caused by sleep, but that expression, what is it? Ngel Lokpa, I think. Niki Lokpa, Niki Lokpe, actually just means falling asleep. We'll see in Venerable Jones' translation is a better one. She translates that first section as, let's see here. For example, having laid down and fallen asleep in a very small room, the elephants of a dream herd of crazed elephants do not exist in that room in any way. Therefore, just like a dream, this is Chittamatra saying, likewise, just the same as in a dream, external objects do not exist. Similarly, inherently existent consciousness is definitely to be asserted. That's how she translated that paragraph. Or Jimpa translates, to this the Chittamatra responds, say one is sleeping inside a tiny room and due to the illusion caused by sleep or due to falling asleep, one dreams of an entire herd of mad elephants. One knows that expression, mad elephants, if you've ever been to India or maybe Indonesia, other places. They can be very destructive. Could those elephants be inside that room? No, they could not. You think it appears very, maybe like a lucid dream that there are elephants there, but they don't exist at all as an external reality. Like this dream, I, Chittamatra, accept with certainty that while there are no external objects, an intrinsically real consciousness does exist. Make sense? What their statement is? No? Richard, so let's read, Richard, let's read Jimpa's note 564 there. So it says, at the end of that paragraph, he has a little mark, 564. If you know that, if you've checked them before, you know that those are footnotes that he's put in. So this footnote says, Jimpa says, perhaps it is because the use of the dream analogy by Chittamatra is so well known, maybe because of that fact, neither Chandrakirti nor Tsong provide any source of the opponent's position here. A classical source is a Sangha's summary of the great vehicle, the Mahayana Samgraha. So you remember we had two different translations of that in the last couple of weeks that we've referred to. One that, who is it? Stephen? The Karl Buchholz, Rumkol's translation, more recent, and there was one by Gelongma. So there's a statement that says, one might ask, what analogy do you have for your statement that these cognitions consist of consciousness only, mind only, that they are Chittamatra with no external reality? What examples do you have? What analogy do you have? And then the answer is, you should see dreams and so forth as analogies for this. So that's the quotation from the Mahayana Sangraha. And Jimpa continues, dream is only one of several similar analogies presented by a Sangha to demonstrate the cogency of the assertion that cognitions can arise without any reference to an objective external reality. The other examples in the same category include recollections, which take on past non-existent objects. So those objects no longer exist. You have a mental consciousness of it, so the analogy is that you can have, without the existence of external objects, in this case, recollection is of something which no longer exists, right? Still, you can have a mental consciousness of that. That's one. The perception of two types of reflections, the reflection of a face in a mirror. Actually, two types of reflection usually means the reflection of your face in a mirror or the reflection of the moon in a quiet pool of water. And then he says the reflection of sounds in the form of echoes. So when you have the auditory perception of an echo, it appears to be something external, like an external, someone crying, or you say you shout in the valley. When you hear the echo, it sounds like there is an existent object out there which doesn't existent person or sound source out there that is coming toward you, independent of yourself, but that doesn't exist. So those are all examples that are given of, by the Chittamatra. Richard, are we following? That's not so bad, right? So in the commentary, go on. Is someone going to say something? So in the text by Brunholz, the Compendium of Mahayana Samgraha, in chapter 2, verse 6, it says, you call all these cognizances, or cognitions, I guess we would also call, mere cognizance, because they are without reference. There's nothing out there that's actually existing external. So what examples are there for this? It continues, it is dreams and so on that should be regarded as examples for this. For example, in a dream, even without external reference, a referent object that actually exists external to the mind, it is nothing but mere consciousness that appears in the aspect of all kinds of reference, such as forms, visual forms that you imagine in the dream, sounds, smells, tastes, tangible objects, houses, forests, earth, and mountains. He has parenthetically. I remember Lama Yeshe used to say that when they were studying in the Prasangika class, in their Geshe studies, the studies went on very, very long. They didn't have very much to sleep at night, very much time to sleep, didn't have much time to eat. And if you were poor at the monastery, you were kind of just, surviving on fumes, so to speak. So Lama said that sometime when he would dream of some tsampa, the Tibetans roasted barley that you pour tea on, with a big lump of butter in it, which is a favored way of eating it. No, it gives it some nice flavor. So when he would awake from that dream, he would dream that he was eating that in the short time that he had. He would feel revived. His body would feel revived. So there can be some result of those perceptions, but there is no referent whatsoever in that dream. There's no bowl of sampa with butter. There's no, herd of wild elephants and so forth. Through this example, it should be understood that in all situations, everything is nothing but mere cognizance. Is how Buchholz is translated, nothing but mere mind. Through using the phrase and so on, it should be understood that illusions, so here's a better list, longer than Jimpa's, illusions, where there's not really, say the magician has produced the illusion of a horse or an elephant or something, or a beautiful woman, that doesn't exist externally, yet one has a mind that apprehends that. Mirages, so there's no water in the mirage, although you have a consciousness like that. Blurred vision, which usually is what we're talking about when we talk about the illusion of falling hairs and so forth. Okay, make sense? Richard, do you still have some?
I think I understand the analogy. What I don't understand is the simile in the text. I don't. The only way I can understand the simile is to understand it as in a dream. There is a herd of mad elephants, but in quote reality, there is no herd of elephants. That there's a basis that's real, and therefore the elephants are not real because they're not in the basis. And if I understand the simile correctly, what he's saying is that in reality, in our waking world, according to the Chittamatra, there is a quote, everything looks similar to the mad elephants, but there's a basis that's intrinsically real. That's the simile that's being drawn. Am I correct in that or not?
I think so. I think so. I'm not sure. So the analogy that's being given is, let's say, the elephant in a dream or elephants in a dream. And it's emphasized here, first of all, that you've fallen asleep in a small room, right? So the herd of wild elephants couldn't exist there anyway, but you would know that when you woke up. There were no elephants anywhere. There's no straw or elephant manure in your room any longer after the dream. So you know that was just a dream. We say when we woke up, oh, that's just a dream. Yet there is a consciousness in that dream that cognizes that. And that's the consciousness itself, devoid of an external object, that consciousness, the Chittamatras say, is inherently existent or existing by its own characteristics. So the analogy is that when you, in your waking state, you can say that it makes sense that these things that seem external, just as it seemed that the elephant in the dream was external, it makes sense that they don't exist, as the Chittamatra propose, yet the mind that's perceiving them, my present mind, my consciousness, inherently exists.
Right. That's, I think I sort of said something similar, but maybe not as precise as you did.
No, I think you did say it probably better than I explained it. So let's continue. So to demonstrate that such a response is pointless, or that's maybe a good way of translating is what did it say? Ningbo meba or Ningbo meba, yeah, nidu is just without any kind of essence. Chandrakirti says, in order to show that kind of response by the Chittamatra doesn't really hit the mark, Chandrakirti says, let's examine. So that's in bold, so you can see that that's from the root text itself, where he says, let's examine this. That is to say, let's analyze this example in this case here. What is it that needs to be analyzed? It is this. Just as elephants in a dream have no existence, this mind that dreams of a herd of mad elephants, a mind that exists by virtue of its characteristics, according to you, where Jempa puts in parentheses there, or brackets, supposedly exists by virtue of intrinsic existence. This mind that dreams of a herd of mad elephants, a mind that supposedly exists by virtue of its intrinsic characteristic, has no existence for us. He says for us either. I'm not sure what he's translating there. Yul Langpo Che Mepa Tar Nge Lukla, in our tradition, yopa minte. It doesn't exist because it is not produced. Jinpa's text says, this is because it is unborn. This mind that dreams of a herd of male elephants, a mind that supposedly exists by virtue of intrinsic existence, has no existence for us. I don't know where Jinpa gets the word either. Does anyone know? Mikhail, are you following the Tibetan? Or John? Not sure where he gets the word either, because that would imply that the Chittamatra don't accept that the mind exists intrinsically. That's their position, right?
I
Anyway.
think the either is for we do not accept external object and not mind either.
Yes,
Okay.
that's how I believe that's.
Okay, good. Would it make more sense if there was a comma after us? Has no existence for us either, or maybe the either could go to a different place. Neither does this mind of, maybe to start it at the beginning.
That's the way to do it.
I
agree.
Neither does this mind of dream of a herd of mad elephants, a mind that supposedly exists by virtue of existence.
Exists for us.
It doesn't exist for us. Yeah, okay, that's good. Thank you. So this is, as the text continues, because it is unborn, or as we usually say, because it is unproduced. What does that mean? It is unproduced.
There's no intrinsic causation by any of the four, either from self or from other, by other, or for both, or neither.
Yeah. So that's what it's not something new. When he translates it unborn, he usually doesn't translate production as birth, although in some traditions you hear about the unborn nature of the mind and so forth. In some contexts, in some of the other traditions that try to explain about the mind, that can have a slightly different connotation, but generally what it means is not produced. It's not inherently produced from self, from other, and so forth. That's our argument. So it doesn't exist inherently the way that you think it does. Supposedly exists by virtue of intrinsic characteristics because it is not produced inherently. And if there is no consciousness that exists by virtue of its intrinsic characteristic, if there's no inherently existent consciousness, then this analogy of yours has no validity, or this analogy, this example of yours does not exist for both of us. It would not be established for both parties. Therefore, there can be no consciousness without external reality. So what's this talking about? When you talk about example, usually the application of examples here, when Jinpa's muddying the words sometimes, muddying the waters by translating example as analogy, sometimes may get a little confusing. Generally, when you have a syllogism to try to prove something, there are various elements that have to be present, right? Does anyone remember? Stephen, can you give a quick summary for a correct logical statement, it has to be present?
Well, there's the subject,
right?
Predicate.
Good.
And I think the predicate breaks down into two, but I'm not remembering.
So how about the reason? So the subject, say the subject sound is impermanent. That's the predicate, right?
Yes.
Because
it is.
Product is a reason. So usually you need to hit those three elements, like the sound of a bell. You need to have an example, like, for example, the sound of a bell. You need to have, in a correct syllogism, it's not sufficient just to have the three elements that are correct, but you also have to have an example upon which you can realize the predicate more easily than let's say, because it's a sound, because it's a product. You can realize the reason through using that example as the predicate. Say, for instance, sound is impermanent because it's a product like the sound of a bell. Now, I'm not explaining clearly here. Let me read what Geshe Zopa said in July 16th, 2003 in the afternoon. He said, example means there has to be a type of example commonly acceptable to both the opponent and oneself. When you give an example, say in a syllogism, try to prove something, Prasangika says you don't have an example which is acceptable to both of us, both you, Chittamatra, and us Prasangikas, because in my Prasangika view, there is no group of huge elephants in the dream. They are not inherently existent. They are not truly existent there. In the way that you, Chittamatra, anyway, they are not inherently existent, truly existent there. In the same way, dreaming consciousness itself is also not truly existent, not inherently existent. The Madhyamika mainly rejects inherent existence, or the Prasangika mainly reject inherent existence. So therefore, as the object is not there inherently, in the same way, consciousness itself is not inherently existent. If that does not exist, if there's not an inherently existent consciousness, you don't have an example which is accepted by both you and I. Hence, consciousness without external objects does not exist. You can't put that as an example in order to try to prove that. Let's take a look again. This analogy of yours, this example of yours has no validity. So now we're getting into talking about the fact that you can't have a consciousness of something unless you have an object of that. Okay, let's read a little bit further because this is a challenging section also. Chimpa translates, what is not being demonstrated here is the following. Just as elephants in a dream do not exist, neither does consciousness. So that's not what's being said. Elephants don't exist in a dream. Therefore, the supposition might be that there's no consciousness of those elephants. That's not what's being said. What one must understand that this statement indicates the non-existence of intrinsically real consciousness. The non-existence. Whereas Chittamatra would like to say that the example is congruent, it goes along with the inherent existent, intrinsically real consciousness. The text continues, for the dependent nature, devoid of external reality, asserted by Chittamatra, is said to possess intrinsic reality. Right? When we talk about dependent nature, remember when we talk about the three kinds of natures, dependent natures, or literally Shenwang, other powered phenomena, imaginary or imputed nature, and what's the word? I can't always remember.
Thoroughly established.
Reestablished. You remembered, and I can't remember. I'm jealous. Okay. One must understand this statement indicates the non-existence of intrinsically real consciousness for Prasangika. For the dependent nature devoid of external reality asserted by Chittamatra is said to possess intrinsic reality. They say that dependent natures, other powered phenomena are intrinsically real, are inherently real, and so forth. We following so far? Maybe not always so clear. What do you think, Anna?
Thank you, Venerable George. Thank you for explaining the words clearly too. I'm just here to remind you, would you consider taking a break? Is it time?
Yeah, let me just read a little bit further here. Thank you for that. In Chimpa's translation, it says, in the commentary, that means Chandrakirti's auto commentary. Also, when commenting on the concluding summary, quote, just as there is no cognizable object, understand that there is no cognizing mind either, which is actually coming up in verse 671. Right now we're at chapter 6, around 40, or what is it? The last verse was what, 48, right? So 30, 20 some odd verses later, there will come up this same context again, going into more detail about the Prasangika assertion that you can't have a consciousness unless there is an object. If there's no object, there's no consciousness. That verse says, just as there is no cognizable object, there is no object to be known, understand that there is no cognizing mind either. So that will be stated later. So that sentence started for in the commentary too, when commenting on the concluding summary that we just read, one finds the following explicit qualification. Know that the cognizing mind that takes on the aspect of the objects of knowledge too is unproduced, unborn, by virtue of its own essence. So there he's stating also that we'll encounter this again when we get to verse 671. When we're refuting that you could have a consciousness of an object, you could have a consciousness without an object that it's cognizing. That's being refuted. Furthermore, both the root text and its relevant commentary, that means the commentary that's explaining that root text, right, contain numerous instances where, when refuting concepts such as this, the object of negation is qualified. Moreover, what Chandrakirti states in the following line about how ignorance gives rise to volition or karmic formations, right? What do we say? Of the 12 links, ignorance. Second one is, he's translating here as volition. We say karmic formations and consciousness and name and form and so forth. So that's what's being talked about here. Moreover, when Chandrakirti states in the following line about how ignorance gives rise to volition, karmic formations, and how karmic formations give rise to consciousness, has to be from the perspective of his own standpoint. So this is now quoting another verse even further on, verse 688, the last two lines of that say, when would the Mahatma, or great one, Dagni Chambo, that's one of the epithets of the Buddha, like Mahatma Gandhi, right? Why then would the Great One proclaim in the same sutra that mind was born from delusion and karma? Okay, so we're going to take a little break there. Before we do, are you following or making sense what's being said here?
I have a question. Like when Chandrakirti says, just as there is no cognizable object, understand there's no cognizable mind either. The Chittamatrans aren't saying there's no cognizable object. They're just saying there's no cognizable object separate from the mind.
Yeah.
So is that
They're
statement?
saying that there are no, in a dream, the object that's being supposedly cognized is a herd of mad elephants, right?
Right, but they're saying that, I mean, they're not relating that with an
Do
external object.
do they exist?
Not separate from the mind is what they're arguing.
Oh, no, they're saying they don't exist at all. There's no mad elephants in your room, right?
But they observed something,
Yeah,
so
but
it has to exist in that aspect.
we have to think about it. They're not qualifying it as that there's no externally existent elephants that are different nature of the mind. They're saying there are no external elephants at all. That's their analogy.
Right, but don't you have to still qualify it with no external elephants outside of mind?
No, in the analogy, you're just talking about there's no external object whatsoever. So Chittamatra is saying in the same way as there are no external objects whatsoever, external different entity from the mind, you can still have a perception of them, even though they don't exist external to the mind. But the analogy is not saying that the dream elephants do exist in some way. They're not saying that. Okay, let's take a little break. Yeah, here we go. We had a nice little break and discussion. Sometimes, yeah. Nadine, you have something you want to say?
Just reading the chat. Thank you.
Oh, okay. I thought you were. Okay, John, what do you think?
I wanted to suggest, Venerable George, that we just look at, because the FPMT translation at the very end of that paragraph that we were just talking about, it's actually pretty confusing to me the way Thupten Jinpa has put it, whereas it's actually pretty clear in the other
Joe's
one.
translation? Okay, let's read that. Does that mean the meaning of these refutations in brief? Is that the one you're talking about?
No, the one that starts in Venerable Drone, it's even in a dream, a mind established, but you don't have to go all the way back there. So if consciousness is not established by way of its own character, then you do not have to, and that from there. And in Thupten Jinpa, it's split up into two sentences at the end. It's the end of the paragraph that begins to demonstrate that such a response is pointless, blah, blah, blah.
Right. So let's read what Joan said there, just from that sentence that John, this is on page, what is this?
172.
72, just in commentary to 648 CD, the third line down from that. If consciousness is not established by way of its own character, this is what Prasangika would be saying, then you do not have an example. Jim sort of says your example is not valid or something. That is established for both of us. That is established for both the Prasangika, Madhyamikas, and the Chittamatrans. Therefore, a consciousness without external objects does not exist.
So I find that really helpful, that the insertion of also does not exist.
Yeah.
In Venerable Jones, because the way that the end of the Thupten Jinpa translation is, therefore there can be no consciousness without external reality. I don't see that that's the conclusion that is intended to be drawn.
Right. So I think Venerable Jones may have Joan may have. Sometimes she accedes to Thupten Jinpa's translation. So she had translated the whole text first. Then when Jinpa's translation came out, she would go back to some problematic sections and sometimes go along with his translations. Here, she thought that she had a better take on it. I think you're right, John. Okay, let me read also what Geshe Zopa said about this, also on July 16th in 2003 in the morning. Jason Khapa says, sometimes some people mistake the root text and commentary, thinking this verse shows the Madhyamika view that the object is not there. And in the same way, consciousness is not there. This is not shown here. This is what was in Jinpa's text, what is not being, what did he say? What is not being demonstrated here. This is because the Chittamatrans, as explained above, assert the other powered phenomena, dependent natures, that do not exist externally are nonetheless inherently existent other powered phenomena. They don't exist inherently, yet they are inherently existent, other powered phenomena. So although they don't exist externally, they still say that they do exist inherently. Okay, a little bit tricky, maybe more than a little bit. Mintu, what are you thinking?
Oh, I was just thinking that, all of these discussions, sometimes it feels that, like, in our mind, at some very deep level, we always try to search for some, like, static point of reference wherever we are. Like, if you're thinking about the physical universe, sometimes we take space and time to be static, like space and time doesn't change, for example, until Einstein proved that space and time are relative. Some people say that if you go down to the very deep level, the atoms are unchanging, and then people prove that the atoms is infinitely composable. So I guess in our mind, sometimes when we look at our mind and we feel that we want to search for, like, layers of the mind that is unchanging, it's like static layers. So is that what it is, the Chitta Mantra position? There's a deep level of the mind that's unchanging. It's like a static level of the mind that is there.
No, they're saying that it does exist. So for instance, this gets down to how we this question of how phenomena exist. The other than the Prasangika Madhyamaka, all of the schools below that say that there's some kind of findable existence if you search. Intrinsically existent, inherently existent, truly existent. Prasangika refutes all of them and says that there is no existence existing from its own side, that phenomena are merely imputed by names and concepts. So that's different. For the Chittamatra, they're saying that there are things that do exist findably if you search their bases, such as dependent phenomena and the mind itself. The mind itself is inherently existent. And even though the external objects don't exist the way that they appear for Chittamatra's point of view, even though the external objects aren't there as they appear in a dualistic manner as different entities from the mind, they still are findable. They still can be analyzed. They still are inherently existent or intrinsically existent.
Yeah, I get that argument. I was thinking that maybe another way to phrase this kind of argument is that it's like space, So for example, like space that we see is, for the most part, it's like there, it's static, unchanging. So for mind, sometimes we say that space unchanging is our point of reference, for example.
No,
In our mind.
no, everyone accepts that consciousness is impermanent, but space is permanent. So that's the wrong avenue to go down. Let's go a little bit further. What did we just say? We were just reading this. In the commentary 2, when commenting on the concluding summary, so we finished that. Furthermore, both the root text and its relevant commentary contain numerous instances where the refuting concepts such as this. So when refuting concepts such as this, the object of negation is qualified. So what is being refuted here, he says, moreover, when Chandrakirti states in the following line about how ignorance gives rise to volition, or karmic formations in the 12 links, right? And how karmic formations give rise to consciousness, has to be from the perspective of his own standpoint. Chandrakirti is saying, why then would the Great One, the Buddha, the Mahatma, proclaim in the same sutra that mind was born from delusion and karma? So he's not saying that mind doesn't exist at all. In light of this statement, how could any thinking person attribute to Chandrakirti the view that consciousness has no existence? Only someone who's not thinking, what do you want to say? A jerk would say that Chandrakirti's position is that consciousness has no existence. It's clear Chandrakirti's position is that consciousness is a dependent arising and it does exist and so forth. Therefore, with respect to all such instances where the parity is being drawn between the cognizer and cognized, right? The subject and the object, insofar as their existence or non-existence is concerned, we should understand these to be from the perspective where what is being negated is qualified. Let's see. What did Venerable Jones say here? Therefore, all equality in the existence and non-existence of objects of knowledge, this is the objects, and the consciousnesses that perceive them, all that equality between them should be understood in terms of the qualification of the objects of negation, of the object of negation. The Chittamatrans say, supposing there is no mistaken consciousness in a dream. Oh no, that's coming in the next paragraph. Let's leave that for a second. Let's see. In light of this statement, how could any thinking person attribute to Chandrakirti the view that consciousness has no existence? Therefore, with respect to all such instances where parity is drawn between the cognizing subjective mind and that which it cognizes, the objects of knowledge, insofar as their existence or non-existence is concerned, he's talking about parity. That means if one exists, the other exists. If there is a cognizing mind, there has to be a cognizable object. If there's no cognizable object, there is no cognizing mind, that kind of parity. We should understand these to be from the perspective where what is being negated is qualified. Let me see. Geshe Zopa had also something here. Therefore, all cases of taking objects of consciousness, objects, and consciousness itself to have equal status as existent or non-existent should be known based on terms or in terms of qualification of the object of negation. From here on, you have to know that an equal status of existence and non-existence for object and consciousness means the following. If one exists, the other should exist. If one does not exist, then the other should also not exist. this statement, Gosung Zepa. This is the Tibetan that comes up in our text here. Go usually means head. Tsung means similar. But anyway, this statement means they are explained in an equal way. This equal status between the cognizing mind and the object is an equal status ultimately the same thing. The object is not ultimately existent, and therefore the subject is also not ultimately existent. In the same way, subject, etc., those subjects and objects, in that sense, equal status. That means they have the same nature. They're not inherently existent. They're not ultimately existent. Rachel, how are you doing?
Oh, I think I have some jet lag left. I'm going
Yeah.
in and out.
Where did you just get back from?
Europe. I did some retreats.
Yeah, you were in Nadine and Mikhail territory. Huh? Okay. So let's continue. A little bit problematic, right? What's going on, but still understanding something. Now, Chippa's text continues. Now, the opponent might entertain the thought. So this is Prasangika saying, you Chittamatrans, you might think if no deluded consciousness exists in dreams, it would be impossible to recall the dream experiences after waking up. He says deluded, but the actual word is tulpa here, which means mistaken. I'm not sure why he chose to say deluded consciousness. If no mistaken consciousness inherently exists in dreams, that this is a Chittamatra position. They'd like to say that in order to exist, it has to inherently exist, right? It has to intrinsically exist. If you can't find a mistaken consciousness that thinks of these elephants and so forth, if that consciousness did not exist, it would be impossible to recall the dream experiences after waking up. Right? Saying if you can't find if that consciousness is not intrinsically existent, you won't be able to remember the dream upon waking up. Do you remember the dreams? Yeah, usually you can. I can remember sometimes just when I'm in that subliminal state coming out of the dream before I'm actually fully awake. I can a little more have a memory of it for a couple of minutes afterwards. But if you train, you can remember it in more detail. The text continues, this kind of objection arises from an assumption by the Chittamatra that if consciousness does not exist by virtue of its own essence, if it's not intrinsically existent, it has no existence at all. And Jhimpa's text continues, this objection is illogical. What's their objection? They're saying that unless the consciousness is inherently existent or intrinsically existent, you wouldn't be able to remember the dream. So as an antidote to this, verse 649 says, if you, Chittamatra, say that the mind must exist because we remember our dream when we wake up, we remember our dreams, the same must be true of external objects. What does that mean? For just as you can recall in terms of I dreamed this, similar recollection exists for external objects as well. Does that make sense? What's he saying there? Venerable Joan translates that what way? If due to, at the end of 172 and the beginning of 173, if due to remembering a dream at the time of waking, mentality exists. Here, that's just the word yi. yagiguyitayit, which is one of the synonyms of consciousness, right? If due to remembering a dream at the time of waking, mentality exists, also external objects would be just like that. Just as you remember thinking, I saw something or other, also like that, the external exists. So what is that verse getting at? If you say that the mind must exist because you remember your dream, this is the Chittamatra position, right? It has to, if the mind didn't intrinsically exist, it wouldn't exist at all and you wouldn't be able to remember the dream. That's more or less that's the essence of that first two lines. The same must be true of external objects. Okay, let's read Lama Tsong Khapa's commentary to that, which is based on Chandrakirti's commentary. If you say that the intrinsically real dreaming mind, this is your assumption, Chittamatra, must exist because we remember our dream when we wake up, that's the Chittamatra position, right, that they're saying here. The same must be true for the objects of that dream. When it says the same must be true, what is the same? Such as elephants being perceived as external. They too would similarly exist. Why is, yeah, that's a good question. Then Lama Tsong Khapa says, why is this so? Why? What's the connection between those two? Because just as you assert the mental consciousness exists, because when awakened, you can recall in terms of, I dreamed this when I was dreaming. You can remember the content, right? I dreamt of showing up to my class totally naked. Isn't that one of the dreams that people have? Or, sitting down for the final examination of some course and thinking, oh, I didn't study at all. I don't know any of this. All of these kinds of dreams. Just as you assert that mental consciousness exists because when awakened, you can recall in terms of, I dreamed this when I was dreaming, similar recollection exists for external objects that one has dreamed as well in terms of, I saw this and that in my dream. Thus, you Chittamatrans are compelled to admit either that external objects exist as well, or that even consciousness has, or on the other hand, consciousness has no existence. Or maybe both. Mikhail, what do you think?
Isn't that the same argument as to when proving self-cognition? That when you remember things, you do not remember the blue, but you remember that you saw blue. You saw blue.
Yeah, well, there are two kinds of recollections. You can have a recollection of the object, like the mad elephant, and you can have a recollection of I saw that elephant, or I experienced that elephant from the subjective point of view. You can talk about recollection in two ways there. So this will be coming up later in the section that explicitly refutes self-cognizing awareness, which is one of those, remember when we talked about the 8 difficult points, exclusive views of the Prasangika, one of them was a special way of disproving self-cognizing awareness. Not all of the lower schools accept Rangrik, self-cognizing awareness. That is a consciousness that is aware of its knowingness. But some do, and Chittamatra, following a Sangha, do. Okay, let's go a little bit further. I hope you're not getting bone indigestion from chewing these dry bones. So the Jinpa's text begins again, as though there's a question now. Since recollection of both experience of a dream and the objects in it, this is exactly what we were just talking about right now. There's two kinds of recollections, the experience of a dream and the objects in it. So that means you can remember, let's say, who had a dream? Ron, did you have a dream last night? You don't remember. Okay. Anyone have a dream last night they remember? Rachel, what did you dream?
Some semi was being like there was an accident and the semi truck was in half.
Okay.
So your herd of wild elephants and your semis, it's all in the same theme.
Right. So that's the object. Since recollection of both experience of a dream and the object. So that's the object. The experience is, what did you say? You saw that in your dream, or you felt the collision, or what?
Yeah, I think I was in one of the cars that cut into it.
Right. So you experienced it in some way. So that's a subjective experience, so there are two different kinds of recollections. Since recollections of both the experience of a dream, it means knowing I dreamed that. When you woke up, I dreamed of that truck hitting my car or whatever, and the objects, that means the truck and the car and so forth, in it do not exist even from our own standpoint. How does one understand their existence or non-existence?
It says do exist, doesn't it? Did you say do not exist?
I probably did. Since recollections of both the experience of a dream and the objects in it do exist, right? Also for our own standpoint, how does one understand their existence or non-existence? So then the commentary replies, or the reply is that Chandrakirti's commentary, the Bhasham, mentions two aspects of recollection. Remembering the experience of dreaming itself. You would say, I dreamed last night. I can remember my dream. I was dreaming. You remember that subjective state. Remembering the experience of dreaming itself and remembering experiencing the objects of a dream. Two different kinds of recollection. So in the context of seeing elephants and so on in a dream, or the trucks and so forth, just as when one sees a reflection of a face in a mirror, okay, you see the reflection of your face in a mirror, the eye consciousness does not experience the face. Is that right? The eye consciousness doesn't experience the face? No, the eye consciousness would have to be looking at your face. Actually, it's seeing a reflection. The eye consciousness sees a reflection of the face, right? Just as when one sees the reflection of a face in a mirror, the eye consciousness does not experience the face itself, but still experiences an object, namely the face's reflection. Still has an object, even though it's not the object that your mind might think is there, right? That this actual face. In the same manner, even though there is no actual experience of an object in the sense of seeing a real elephant at the time of the dream, there's no actual experience of an actual elephant, right? There is still an experience in the form of the perception of an elephant. So this is getting back to answer some of Sean's and others' questions. So although one might speak of, quote, remembering the object, what one actually remembers is the experience of perceiving such an object. Differentiating between perceiving and experiencing as having distinct senses may be necessary in some specific contexts, but in numerous contexts, such as the present one, there is no need for such distinction. So what is that talking about? So that gets to verse 566. I can read it better if I look at it here. Okay. Verse 566 says, or note 566 in Jimpa's text says, Tsongkhapa is saying that for cognitions in general, the act of perceiving, which is his way of translating, or say, let's say the act of observing, mikvah. When we talk about the word mikvah, it's come up many times when we say mikmei sewe ter chenrezi, non-referential or non-objectifying. Anyway, here it's being used in a subjective sense. The act of perceiving an object is the experiencing of that object as well. So for cognitions, when you perceive something, you're experiencing that thing. For instance, when our visual perception comes into contact with an object, say a blue flower, it experiences the object by perceiving it. Or you could say it perceives it by experiencing it. The two are coextensive. But in some specific contexts, a distinction must be made between perceiving and experiencing. When? What contexts are those? Such as when the Buddha's mind perceives the suffering of sentient beings. So there would be, in some people's minds, there would be a contradiction. The Buddha is cognizant of the suffering of sentient beings, right? He knows that. Does the Buddha experience that suffering? Usually, to say experience would seem to be wrong there, right? Because the Buddha's mind only experiences great bliss, has no neutral or suffering feelings whatsoever. To say that the Buddha experiences the suffering would violate convention by, quote, specific context, unquote. Here, Tsongkhapa might also be thinking of Dharmakirti's distinction in the Pramanavartaka. So that would be chapter 3, verse 459. Chandrakirti's distinction between perceiving as referring to cognition's act of perceiving its object and experiencing as referring to its act of revealing itself in a reflexive manner. So reflexive manner means what? Self-cognition, right? Okay. So just let me read this next paragraph to finish up that section before our summer break. So the assertion that dependent nature, devoid of external reality, exists by virtue of its intrinsic characteristic cannot be sustained. This is because no possible analogy or example could directly illustrate, or how did Venerable Joan translate? Instead of directly, this is therefore, Venerable Joan said, therefore, an established by way of its own characteristic other power phenomena, an other power phenomena established by its own characteristic that is empty of externality cannot be positive. That's what Prasangika says. You can't say that there is that other powered phenomena that are established by way of their own character, inherently existent, are empty of externality. You can't give any example of that, since there does not exist an obvious example of such other power phenomena. She translates it as obvious analogy. Chimpa says, no possible analogy could directly illustrate this. She said there is no, what did I just say? no obvious example. So she's translating the word ngo there is obvious, or Jimpa puts the obvious or direct, meaning directly illustrate this. Nor could there be analogies or examples similar to those used in the proof of past and future lives, where, although no direct example exists, illustrations can be made on the basis of providing a proof through a different syllogistic formulation. In view of all of the above, one should understand that the arguments entailed in the refutation of Chittamatra are extremely powerful. So let's see, what before we end, there's note 567. So Jimpa's, this is what we were talking about before. If you look in Jimpa's text, note 557, this is his own, footnote, so to speak. In classical Indian logical reasoning, analogy or illustration, we would usually say example or illustration, plays a crucial role in facilitating a correct inference. Remember when we were just talking with Stephen before, we said sound is impermanent because it's a product like the sound of a bell. You can realize that the sound of a bell is impermanent because it arises because of exertion, right? You have to do something. In classical Indian logical reasoning, example or illustration plays a crucial role in facilitating a correct inference. In most cases, such analogies or examples are what Lama Tsongkhapa calls here direct example, such as in the syllogism, sound is impermanent because it is a product, just as a pot, for example. Sound is impermanent because it is a product, just as a pot, for example. So that's a good example, right? Sound is impermanent because it's a product. So can you understand, what would you understand? A pot is impermanent because it's a product. So you can understand that. First of all, that's the quality that has to be that has to be present in an example, that you can use that as the subject. A pot is impermanent because it's a product. Is that relatively easy to understand? Because you can see a pot being made. It's a product of, causes and conditions. And you can also understand that it's impermanent. First of all, it was just a lump of clay and that later became a pot. So you can understand that that's impermanent. Also, when it's destroyed, when you break it with a hammer or you drop it on the floor or something, you can understand that it's impermanent. Such as the syllogism, sound is impermanent because it is a product, just as a pot, for example. Where the example, a pot, illustrates on the subject sound the invariable relationship between something being impermanent and being a product. Such a direct example or direct analogy is not viable in the proof of past lives. The thesis past lives is proven only indirectly, as in this typical syllogism, quote, the consciousness of the newborn child must have been preceded by an earlier instance of consciousness because it is an instance of consciousness, just as our present moment of consciousness, for example. Okay, we'll go into this again when we come back in September. But does this sound familiar to anyone? When we're talking about the proof of past lives. Yeah, there are proofs. I remember I think I told you the story of Serkon Rinpoche. I think Serkon Sensho Rinpoche being asked about the Dalai Lama, whether that was the reincarnation. This young boy was a reincarnation of the Dalai Lama. And Serkan Rinpoche said there are many proofs of the continuity of mind that Jinpa is alluding to here. But for Serkan Rinpoche said, I knew the previous Dalai Lama, and when I met this young boy, I knew, by being in his presence and everything, that this was the same person. So the logic that from Indian Buddhism, Mahayana Buddhism, starting with Dharmakirti's proofs and so forth, in the existence of past and future lives, is of a different category here. It says, illustrations can be made on the basis of providing a proof through a different syllogistic formulation. In view of the above, one should understand that the arguments entailed in the refutation of Chittamatra are extremely powerful. So we'll go over that a little when we come back in September, and then we'll start with this next section, how the dream analogy does not establish non-existence of external reality. So the Chittamatrans would like to say there can be the cognition of something that doesn't exist externally, like the elephants. That dream analogy does not establish the non-existence of external reality. How many negatives are there in that part? It does not establish non-existence. You could say that that could also mean it does establish the existence of external reality, right? Anyway, we can go into that next time. Thank you for your patience. I guess John had to go somewhere. Okay. Any questions before we end? How are we doing?
Thank you for your patience.
Oh yeah, no, I'm not patient at all. I'm annoyed with the mosquito bite in the dreams still. Yeah. So there were two verses I wanted to mention from Lama Chopa Puja, the Guru Puja, in relation to one of the prayers that we'll say in a moment when we dedicate the merits. One of the prayers for the quick return to see the smiling face of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, right? It talks about his actions, both teaching and otherwise. So in two of the verses of the Guru Puja, when it's talking about making requests to the Guru, it says, what does it say? Sangye drangme, even though the infinite Buddhas of the past were not able to tame the beings of this degenerate age, you, my Guru, have set forth precisely the teachings in accordance with reality. And then the following verse, that's one of the qualities, that being able to teach precisely the teachings. And the other verse says that during the time when the Buddha's teachings are in decline, when the sun of the Buddha's teachings is setting, so that's talking about a degenerate age, you manifest in order to enact the activities, like making stupas and building statues and giving teachings and so forth. I make these requests to you. So keep that in mind while we recite these dedication prayers. So great. If you can make that a little larger. There we go. Due to these virtues, as a result of these virtues, may I quickly become a Guru Buddha. Why? To be able to lead all migrators, without exception, into that very same state. That's sort of like one of the predominant, most relevant dedications we can make. And then the prayer from the prayer of Maitreya, we can think of also as a dedication. Due to these virtues, may the supreme precious bodhicitta that has not yet arisen in my mind stream and in the mind stream of others, may that bodhicitta arise and grow due to these virtues. And may that which has already arisen, may I not lose it, may it not diminish, but as a result of these merits, may whatever little inklings of bodhicitta I have increase more and more. And for the prayer for the swift return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, Kepche Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Kepche, sort of sublime protector, peerless teacher, an assembly of bodhisattvas, Shravakas, and Pratika Buddhas. The conqueror Losang Drakpa, that means Lama Tsongkhapa, who is the spiritual father to his sons Kedrubche and Galsabche, together with your lineages, all objects of refuge of the infinite realms, includes all other lineages, other traditions, other Buddhists. Please now bestow the virtue and goodness to accomplish this prayer. In holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice. That's the point I was just making about these two verses in the Lama Chopa. Through explanation and practice, exemplifying the teachings through your practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable, venerable Guru, to you I make request. Sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, while striving exclusively for the welfare of the conqueror's teachings and for the welfare of mother living beings, you suddenly passed away. You suddenly departed to peace, passed into nirvana. At this, I lost hope. I was, dejected. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truths of the oceanic blessings of the three jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta of the bodhisattvas, by these truths, bodhisattvas have these great waves of bodhicitta, and the triple gem has oceanic blessings. By that truth, by the power of truth, may the smile of a new reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for us fortunate disciples. And finally, you who are my eyes for viewing all the infinite scriptures, all of our gurus, present, past, primordial, supreme gateways for the fortunate ones traveling to liberation. So the entryway, your contact with the guru is sort of like opening up the gate for traveling to liberation. Before that, before we've heard from the guru about the teachings, there's no way to even contemplate traveling to liberation. Engaging as you do with skillful means, moved by mercy, love, and compassion, illuminating spiritual friends, I make this request. The implication being, please live long and stable lives. Okay, thank you very much. So we will commence again, I guess, what is it, September 2nd?
September 6th.
September 6th. Okay, got a break. Have fun. Take a look at these PDFs. I found very interesting to read the Lalita Vistara, chapter 26, I think it was, on the turning of the wheel of Dharma, where it went through many other seemingly unrelated things, like different epithets of the Tathagata. Some of them resonated very powerfully. And you can compare that exposition with the exposition from the Pali, which is still preserved, that you also have the PDF of, that was translated by Bhikkhu Bodhi, but also delve into the 12 aspects of the Four Noble Truths that are talking about that particular situation and turning the wheel of Dharma. Otherwise, when we talk about aspects of the Four Noble Truths, we really usually talk about 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths. But there's no contradiction there. Okay. Yeah, Doris.
Thank you, Venerable. Just a reminder, there will not be discussion on Monday since this is the
Right.
last.
Right. But there will be Dharma office hour. Who's in the Dharma office hour?
Nadine and Louise.
Nadine and Louise. Okay. I look forward to seeing you then. Have a good vacation. Stay safe.
Venerable George, please, you also stay safe, be healthy and happy, and return to continue teaching us. Please, please.
I will try, yeah, if my karma doesn't throw a curveball in there. Yeah, and so try to use your teachings during the break, especially the lojong, the training of the mind. So some of the lojong, the principal precept of the lojong transformation of the mind, training of the mind, is to be able to bring adverse conditions into the path. So there are two ways of doing that, through the method and through wisdom. So at some point you try to do Tonglen and meditate on bodhicitta and karma and sort of the relative truths. And when that doesn't solve your problems, meditate on emptiness. When that blade, the meditation on emptiness, doesn't help, go back to meditating on the conventional. So you alternate between developing the two bodhicittas, the conventional bodhicitta and ultimate bodhicitta. So look forward to seeing you in September. Take care.